Today's episode of Daily Detroit is brought to you by Orange Sparkle Ball. Are you struggling to implement innovation and change within your organization? With a unique human-centered innovation approach, Orange Sparkle Ball, or OSB, helps organizations break through roadblocks and pain points to achieve measurable results. OSB is not your typical consultancy. OSB's agile approach to innovation allows you to move quickly to action and achieve measurable pilot results. To learn how you can drive innovation and success in your organization, contact OSB today at hello@osb.co. That's hello@osb.co. Hey everyone, east and west of Woodward, this is your Daily Detroit for Thursday, July 6th, 2023. You know, over the years, I have heard about so many farming concepts, especially when it comes to Detroit. Vertical farming's come up a few times too, but, it's not in a widespread basis around here. There are definitely some examples, but what looks to be the biggest example of this is about to happen just south of 94 and a block east of Woodward with Vertical Harvest Farms Detroit. This upcoming project is very interesting to me, so I wanted to dive into it more. We're going to talk to the co-founder and CEO right now. Joining me virtually is Nona Yehia. She is the CEO and co-founder of Vertical Harvest, a project I'm very interested to learn more about. Welcome to Daily Detroit.
I'm so happy to be here, Jer.
Yeah, so this announcement has made some waves because, vertical farming, of course, gets people's interest. And it seems, though, that although there's this vertical farming aspect, I want to talk about that, and I want to talk about why. This is a multifaceted project. When I was looking at the materials you were sharing, it's farming, but farming plus, right? It's development plus. So let's talk about how these two things kind of go together.
Jer, I'm an architect by trade. And so I really, really have always believed that architecture can be a vehicle for change. It can be a catalyst for change. And that's what really brought me to vertical farming. I really wanted to reconnect farms to cities, right? Because that's where we all live, and solve the problem that we all, as urban dwellers, import our food that we eat. And by the time it gets to our plate, it is not the best quality, right? I started thinking about this idea in 2008 with a really amazing team. And we said, could we create a farm in the heart of the city that solves more problems than one? Could it be a part of the essential civic infrastructure of a downtown? And so from the very outset, we said, yes, this is an environmental solution, but how can we engage public health? How can we engage social justice issues? How can we engage economic resiliency? And so Vertical Harvest not only creates food, but it creates jobs. We're a food and jobs movement. If we're going to reconnect the farm to the heart of the city, who are going to be our farmers? And that's where our Locals First program comes from. We really believe that successful communities are sustainable communities and that the farm can be a part of that.
Let's talk about the farm. So let's orient people, because
Sure.
I look at the renderings and I go, okay, that's not a lot of space for a farm. But on the other hand, I look at the materials and it's like, oh, you're going to do 100 acres worth of food on this thing, which I feel like not only would be efficient, but also, you're talking about workers. It feels like it's also a lot more efficient for workers getting around that and things like that. And being inside and climate controlled also kind of changes some things. Why don't we talk about the vertical farm and what drew you to doing a vertical farm?
I come from Wyoming, and the growing season's very short. It is 4 months long. So, I think that's why we have set up the food system the way we have, right? We import all of our food, and that's not a very resilient or healthy way to do things. And in fact, over the last 3 years, we've seen exactly how vulnerable that is. Now, vertical farming, it's the fastest growing industry in agriculture, indoor farming, growing the plants indoors. But it's never going to replace traditional agriculture. But how do we supplement traditional agriculture? How do we use it as a tool to respond to communities' problems? I think that's where vertical farming is very useful. So as you said, on a very small footprint, we can grow over 2 million pounds of food for the local community. And I think that's really important. Now, Jared, these plants are the most pampered plants you'll ever meet. They want for nothing. They are fed exactly the right nutrients. They are fed exactly how much light they need to grow. And they're not stressed out. They're not fighting drought. They're not fighting pestilence. And so they're really high quality produce. And we deliver from farm to fork. The ideal is within 24 hours. So we're at the peak of the nutritional value, but we're also at the peak of the taste value. Right? We forget what real produce really tastes like. The Easter market, only can exist in the summertime. So that is really important to us to be able to kind of reconnect not only people with local food, but the quality of food that we're able to provide in indoor farming.
As a personal anecdote, if you've never had a fresh or a farm fresh tomato or an heirloom tomato versus that kind of thing you buy in the store, there is a huge difference. I only say that for listeners in case you haven't tried it. That's one of the fruits and vegetables where I think there is one of the biggest differences between fresh and one that's been on there for a while, or even different varieties that in a more controlled environment, it feels like you're going to be able to execute a lot better than, the giant agriculture version of the tomato or something like that.
Exactly. It's all in the journey. I mean, that tomato that you're talking about that you can find in the grocery store, it has been bred to endure the journey. I mean, on average, our food travels 2,000 miles before it gets to our plates. By the time it gets there, it doesn't have much nutritional value and it doesn't have much taste value. So forget the nutrition for a second. We just want our food to taste like something, right? What vertical farming allows us to do is have a hyper-local response to growing food, to get people the food that they need in a way that tastes good and feels good. So this is how I think indoor farming will mean something to people, to individuals, their families, their neighborhoods, their cities. And I think this is the real promise of CEA, which is controlled environment agriculture.
Now, something I noticed on your website was this is not your first rodeo. This is not the first time you've done something like this. And I think that's important for people here because there are a number of projects in a number of places where you look at it's like, oh, that sounds really cool, but do they have the ability to do it? But in, I believe it's Jackson Hole, you've been able to do something similar?
Yeah, we have been running our farm. It's a 3-story greenhouse, a little smaller than the one in Detroit, but we have been running it since 2016. So we know how to grow the plants. We know what products people like. We know how to grow the futures as well. We have a training program where we've really created an inclusive response to training in Jackson Hole. 40% of our workers identify with some sort of physical or intellectual disability. Now, in Jackson, there was an 88% unemployment rate for people with disabilities who lived in the community. And so we really felt strongly that we could be part of the solution there. And so now not only are farmers engaging in the most important thing for any community, which is the production of healthy, nutritious food, but they're leading the charge in this very fast-growing industry and becoming, the leaders of today and tomorrow by participating in this effort. And I think that's a sea change of perception for people with disabilities. And it really points to what you can do when you focus on people's abilities rather than the stereotypes around disability.
So in that vein, why Detroit and how did this come together?
Well, Jerry, I'm very excited. I was born and raised in Detroit, and I think that Detroit has gone through a lot of changes. My family still lives in Detroit. My daughter just graduated from high school in Detroit, and I've watched, the city pivot and grow. And one thing that's remained the same is that, when you go to, where we're going with this farm in Milwaukee Junction, you don't see the quality produce being available for the community. You don't see food resiliency, although there's a very vibrant food scene. I think that there's a real potential to have real impact in Detroit. And then, for us, it's really about the value of our relationships. Obviously, Bedrock is an incredible partner who is involved in how do we build the city of the future for the people who live there now? And, for us, that is the most important thing. But as soon as, we started cultivating this relationship, I knew that I would pour all my passion and energy into making Detroit a real highlight of our expansion plans.
So when we talk about this expansion, what are some of the nuts and bolts of it? I look at the rendering Am I correct in that that's kind of like John R. and Piquette kind of area, kind of
Yes,
just south of 94?
exactly. Milwaukee Junction,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
We will be working full force on developing the plans. They're midway through right now, and we hope to be open for the community in 2025. We're moving forward on all fronts here. And we have a farm like this midway through construction outside of Portland, Maine right now.
Oh, wow. I did not know that. So what are some of the things that need to happen between now and 2025?
Just heads down. We have contractors that we're putting together, and we really need just to start construction. And obviously, what we do at Vertical Harvest is we envision the community as our customer, right? This is not only about selling our produce to retail, which is very important, but we really engage in the anchor institutions that make a community tick. So the local hospitals, higher ed, K through 12, food justice organizations. How can we create a portfolio of food that addresses the real need and the real demand for locally grown food? So we do a lot of work listening to what the community needs are. What are the community needs in terms of employment? Who are the people who we can work with to make sure that we're successfully employing people? So within the next year, there's going to be a lot of work done really understanding the community, tailoring the programs and the way we grow food to the community, as well as getting the building underway.
So is that going to be your distribution channel or multiple distribution channels? Or?
Multiple distribution channels.
So would someone like me be able to buy some of this somewhere and it also goes to particular service organizations, or how does that all work?
Exactly. So in Maine, we work with local grocery stores, Hannaford's, that has over 150 stores around the region, as well as local food distributors. So it's Native Maine that delivers local food to all of the customers that I outlined. So you will be able to buy it in the stores. You'll also be able to come to the farm and pick up your lettuce on your way home. Jerry, you're 2 blocks away. And then you'll see it in local restaurants. You'll see it in the programs that feed our hospitals and our schools. So it's really, like I said, we view the community as our customer, and we have a policy of feeding locals first. We like to keep all of the produce within a 150-mile radius so that we make sure that it's not leaving the community, which anchors it.
Well, and having some sort of store or retail component seems very interesting as well. And
Yes.
definitely serves a need. It's right near a major transit line, which when you're talking about serving communities, that's in fact a number of transit lines, because Woodward is such a spine for the region. So with you looking at like doing contractors and things like that, you all have the resources to make this thing happen. Like this is moving forward. This isn't necessarily just in the design stage.
We're, of course, always making sure that this is a feasible project. But yes, we are moving forward and really hope to have this serving the community, like I said, in about a year.
All right. And the physical size of it that we're talking about for listeners who may not have read any of the articles out there?
It'll be 75 feet tall, but it's a 3-story building. So on about a half an acre, we can really be efficient on how we grow food there and produce over 2 million pounds of produce for the community. It's a really beautiful building. It is something that the community can be proud of. And my vision back to the idea, that this comes from my career as an architect, it's something that I hope people will value, like a local library or a local community center. The local farm can be reconnected to the city in that way.
Wow. And I have to ask, because I'm sure people will be curious, like, what does it take to build a building like that or to do this kind of project? Do you know kind of like what the approximate project price is on this one, or is that not out there yet?
Yeah, it's not out there yet, but it's under development. And I think, it's a piece of civic infrastructure. So yes, they're expensive, but they're highly productive for the community as well.
Okay, yeah. And I ask these questions because, in a town like ours, I'm sure right? A lot of people.
I do know.
Right, because you're from here. People have questions, and they mostly have questions because of the history around here, because you're from here. So how many projects were kind of put on a drawing board somewhere. And it's always like, you got to have the vibe check. Like, can you do it, right?
You got to have the vibe check. And Jared, look, I have built my career on this. I am a woman in the industry. I think that it's always been something that we've had to prove. And I think that what we will show is that we are authentic, we are transparent. I like to say that I embrace my skeptics as much as my supporters because that's who you learn from and that's how you build the best business case. So we really look forward to answering people's questions, talking about this, talking about how we've done it in other places and why it's important to Detroit. So, I mean, I'm so happy to be here with you talking about just that.
For sure, for sure. Well, I am excited to see and watch the progress of this thing. There are a lot of needs that this is going to work to address, especially being where it's at and being connected to communities and all those things. So, Nona, I really appreciate your time on Daily Detroit.
Yeah, I was very excited to be here. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
So what did you think of that conversation? dailydetroit@gmail.com. Would love to hear from you. Tomorrow, National Dive Bar Day. Devin O'Reilly, Mr. Friday, joins me. We're going to talk about a couple stories around town and, of course, your listener questions. With that, I am Jer Stays. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much to our members at patreon.com/dailydetroit for helping this thing go. Thanks behind the scenes to Cheyenne Oserini for editing this interview. So remember that you are somebody. We'll see you around Detroit.